Top Gun Maverick looked great on camera, but that's because of the brutal training and filming the actors had to go through behind it. Today I'm taking an in-depth, behind-the-scenes look at how Tom Cruise and the Navy turned a team of inexperienced actors into on-screen jet fighters. Plus how, with the help of the military, the production team managed to capture it all, put it on the big screen, and satisfy our need for speed. For this movie, Tom Cruise wasn't going to accept anything less than the actors going up in F-18s for real. So this meant the actors needed to be able to handle the extreme G-forces of a fighter jet. A day out in Disneyland wasn't going to quite cut it for training, so instead Cruise worked with the film's aerial coordinator Kevin LaRossa Jr. to devise an intense 3-month program that would get the cast up to speed. This all meant that when it looks like they're all being smashed to the edge of unconsciousness by G-forces, that's because they are.
But that is awesome.
The ASTC, or Aviation Survival Training Curriculum everyone had to complete to qualify for the extensive flying sequences, included classroom lessons on topics like acceleration, G-forces, altitude physiology, reduced oxygen breathing device training, aeromedical aspects of ejection, and aviation life support systems. Once they'd done their homework, they were allowed to move on to ejection seat training and virtual parachute descent, parachute landing fall, then lateral drift training. I told you this stuff was intense, but that's nothing yet. The course then moved on to an outdoor pool for super physically demanding training, such as survival gear inflation, and underwater problem solving. The cast were basically highly paid ragdolls thrown into a swimming pool, so hopefully they paid attention in class.
I felt like I was drowning. It was tough.
They were tested by being rotated underwater in an ejection seat and being dragged across the pool attached to a parachute, where they had to disentangle themselves. Not your average swim in the local leisure centre. And all this before we've even talked about planes. Just like the rest of this training, and for military training in general, the actors needed to work their way up to the end goal. In this case, the F-18 Super Hornets. They did this gradual approach for fear their stomachs might actually be lost in the skies of California. This started with the Cessna 172, which took them through basic flying. This allowed them to see what it's like to take off, land, and know where to look and put their hands. This training wheels plane also allowed the actors to get a little taste of what G's laid ahead. The Extra 300 was next, and this is similar to what the general public would see at an air show, with those planes doing crazy moves. It can pull up to 8 Gs and taught the crew how to hold down their lunch. Finally, before they got their go in the Big Daddy F-18, the L-39 Albatross needed to be conquered. This allowed them to experience a fighter trainer jet, and at this point, only 2 members of the cast hadn't thrown up during their flight: Tom Cruise himself and Monica Barbaro, who plays Phoenix. Once the Albatross was done, they were allowed to get into the F-18s, where they'd not only have to be filmed thousands of feet in the air, but they'd have to do the filming themselves.
Just a little higher, because I have a great camera position.
And surprisingly, it's quite difficult to film in a space where even Harry Potter would struggle to call home. The cameras needed to be made bespoke for the movie to allow IMAX shots to be captured in the tiny cockpits. Just don't tell Tom Cruise I called his cockpit tiny.
I'm just telling you right now, okay? Just put your manners back in.
After all the work was done to fit the cameras, some had as many as 6 cameras at a time inside to film. Outside of the plane, up to 4 cameras could be mounted on a jet for exterior shots. These included 2 under the belly, 1 under the wing, and 1 on the nose. Director Joseph Kosinski got his money's worth with those cameras. He ended up shooting 800 hours worth of footage from real jets. At one point, he had 27 cameras running simultaneously, 4 jets up in the air and 2 units filming on the ground. He might have got a little bit carried away because once filming wrapped, he shot more footage in the air than was shot for the Lord of the Rings trilogy. But there was a good reason for this, because during the shoot itself, Kosinski wasn't really directing. He had to rely on the actors themselves to sort things out, as the director was completely blind on the ground. Not literally, filming wasn't that dangerous. Kosinski would set the cameras up, making sure the angles were where they should be, but once that jet flew off, the actors were gone for the next hour or 2. As soon as they landed, the production team then took the footage, went into debrief, and then watched it together. Any reshoots needed had to be done in another session later that day. That meant the director was only getting a minute or 2 of good footage each day. It was a tedious process akin to finding Tom Cruise in a haystack, but it was all worth it. But none of it would have happened without the help of the US Navy, or at least it might have done, but it would have looked like crap.
You screw up just this much, you'll be flying a cargo plane full of rubber dog shit out of Hong Kong.
After the original Top Gun acted as a giant homoerotic billboard for the US military and increased sign-ups by 500%, the Navy were more than happy to offer their services up again for the sequel. They provided 2 aircraft carriers, 4 bases, and mentorship from real naval aviators for filming. They also offered advice on the scenarios seen in the film. For example, Kaczynski claimed that the only piece of advice he rejected from actual pilots to make the bombing run as challenging a scenario as possible was to set the flight at night. I'm guessing at that point he was so sick of filming in planes that he didn't fancy the additional challenge of not being able to see. But all this help came at a price. Firstly, the literal price for as much as $11,000 an hour to borrow the fighter planes from the US Navy, and the cost of not having everything your own way. Kaczynski found that after taking photos around a Navy base for research, his camera got confiscated and wiped.
Let's wave and smile.
But that being said, the military cooperation was crucial for the filming being so good, and it's not their first rodeo. They even have a dedicated department that puts the prop in propaganda. It's called the Department of Defense Entertainment Media Office, and they're experts in supporting movies for expertise in military equipment. The department has existed for over a century and helped to make the first ever Best Picture Oscar winner, the World War I-inspired 1927's Wings. Even the script got the Navy treatment. After initial clearances, Captain J.J. Yank Cummings and Commander Tim Sparky Charlebois worked with the film's screenwriters and Kaczynski for several months to make sure the film depicted the Navy accurately, positively, and professionally. Essentially, it sounds like they checked that the Navy wasn't being slagged off at any point, or if they needed to cut out any references to the village people. Military engineering giants Lockheed Martin's Skunk Works also partnered with Paramount Pictures to produce a physical mock-up of their unfinished hypersonic SR-72 stealth plane for the Dark Star sequence, complete with the Lockheed logo on the pilot stick and signature skunk on the tail. There's no doubt this movie went all out when it came to military realism.